The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is our regularly scheduled edition of the Nerdcast Empire on this Sunday night, October the 26th, 2025. I'm Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. The Hard Rock Empire back for episode number 90 or 88, I should say, 191 of the Nerdcast Empire. And we are back for the second time this week with kind of a different schedule because of my travels, but we are back on our regular schedule. It should be pretty much, with maybe an exception or two, for the remainder of 2025. And tonight we're talking the music of October the 3rd, another really solid week in music. So looking forward to bringing you all the highlights. And we're going to talk some news headlines first. We'll, of course, talk about some classic albums in the vault and answer our question of the week in the Power Trio. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. Yeah, kind of a short week with us having had a show on Wednesday, was it?
Yeah.
That being said, there was a lot of new music to cover between then and now, and a lot of good stuff, a lot of different stuff, and a lot of interesting stuff. But yeah, I like what I've picked, and I'm kind of excited to get into it.
Yeah, it was definitely another interesting week. Very diverse selection of music. So I think people, when they get to Mike's playlist and get a chance to check through it, I think you'll really enjoy some of the stuff that is out there that might be a little bit different than what is normal. And just a couple of quick announcements before we get started, and just a reminder that here in the States, the time change will change next week, so we will be coming your way still at 7 o'clock Eastern time, but we'll be back on Standard Time. So depending on what your area does as far as changing the clocks, this show may be an hour off of where it is. In fact, in the UK today, if you're listening to us from the UK, you're already an hour off because British summertime ended. So it's going to change, and then we'll change again for you next week. So just a heads up, if you're joining us next Sunday night, time change next week here in the United States. So we will be 1 hour back from where we are right now. We go back to Standard Time. And, of course, join our Discord. That you'll always know when we're streaming by going into our Discord. You'll be able to set that to it'll show up on your local time zone and your local time, so you'll know when we'll be on the air. So make sure you do that, especially this time of year when we get to the time changes, and it's just really sad when you look outside and it's dark at like 6 o'clock. I was just out in Las Vegas, and it was like 5 to 5:30, and it was getting dark because, of course, Las Vegas is on the far eastern side of the Western or Pacific time zone, so it got dark first. And yeah, it was just kind of depressing to look outside and see that already. But
I've always wondered about that. Working with people who live like in Maine and New Hampshire, like they kind of get the worst end of the deal than we do, even.
Yeah, and I just kind of went through the same thing. I was in Nashville for a couple of days. They're on the far eastern side of the Central time zone, so same sort of deal with that early nighttime. I didn't really notice it because there were no outside windows in my hotel room, but definitely something we deal with this time of year. Seasonal depression back in full effect. But we're hoping we will save you from some of that seasonal depression with some awesome music, and we'll get to that in our second segment of tonight's show. But first thing we're going to get to, just some concert announcements and events, and just a couple of just really smaller notes today in the news headlines segment. We've got a couple of tours to talk about. That we always like to bring those up when they come up. We'll start off first with this first article that details Iron Maiden's 2026 North American tour with Megadeth and Anthrax. That's going to be fantastic. I've seen two of those three bands. I have not seen Iron Maiden. I would love to see Iron Maiden. I would really be excited to go see this, but not a whole lot to say other than just this is going to be a phenomenal show.
Yeah, no kidding. Just kind of looking into the article, they talked to Steve Harris, and he mentions kind of enjoying the idea of touring with Megadeth and Anthrax, who he kind of points out as being friends of theirs for a while back now. And yeah, it's kind of the recurring theme, I think, with some of these tours where it's like you're going to find bands you want to spend time with and take them out with you. And obviously for Megadeth and Anthrax, getting to tour with Maiden's a huge deal. Maiden's going to be doing Louder Than Life next year, so I'm kind of curious where they fall, if they're going to be going to any other festivals, perhaps. And kind of going into the other stories too about tours, it just makes you more anxious to see what Sonic Temple ends up with, because it's like there are a lot of bands that are getting booked for either Louder Than Life or Sick New World. You know, is that indicative of, hey, they're playing all the festivals, or are we going to get kind of scraps for Sonic Temple? I mean, obviously Louder Than Life being same company that runs both it and Sonic Temple, but yeah, I'll be curious to see how these shake down.
Well, and we'll find that out this week, and of course that'll be one of our topics. Maybe our only news topic next week is Sonic Temple announcing their full lineup, and there is certainly a possibility that these three bands will all be at Sonic Temple as part of.
Amazing.
Yeah, because you want to talk about a day that you really wouldn't be able to miss. That would be pretty fantastic. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Definitely something to keep an eye on. And the next one I posted into the chat as well. Foo Fighters is funny because I was just talking about them, about how they could do a Vegas residency and have Queens of the Stone Age, and so here we have Foo Fighters and Queens of the Stone Age announcing a 2026 North American tour. Queens of the Stone Age will be on all but one of the shows. I believe they won't be in Fargo, but tickets go on sale at the end of this week, October 31st. So. Again, another one of those tours, and again, another one of those situations where it feels like the timing of this tour announcement, as we kind of speculated back on Wednesday, I think it was, kind of lines up to think that this could also be a precursor to potentially a Sonic Temple announcement.
Yeah, that, again, wouldn't be a bad thing. I think there are so many possibilities, and you're just fearing that what we're going to end up with is going to feel lackluster to certain segments of fans, but yeah, not surprising to see these acts touring together. I know Dave Grohl has been friends with Josh Homme forever, since like Caius days, so be a good show, no doubt about that.
Yeah, so we'll, again, if any of those bands end up on the Sonic Temple lineup or don't end up on the Sonic Temple lineup, we will talk about that next week. Another one that's obviously noteworthy, an album that we have all seen in its entirety in person. Slayer will be celebrating the 40th anniversary of Rain and Blood at the inaugural Sick New World, Texas in October 2026. As I've made clear, like, Slayer is probably number 4 on my list of the big 4, just because their music is definitely heavier than the other 3, a little bit farther to that end of the spectrum. But getting a chance to see Rain and Blood in person up in Columbus a few years ago was still something that was really cool. And it's, again, another one of those, well, now you feel old. Like, this album is now 40 years old. And, I'm sure, if we get kind of a full-blown tour, I would imagine they would, again, potentially play it in its entirety in these events. So, again, another one of those bands that if you are a metal fan, you haven't seen Slayer, I think you owe it to yourself to see those guys at least once.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Slayer is Slayer, and even if they're not one of my preferred of the big 4, they put on a great show. They're legendary. Rain and Blood's a classic. The song Raining Blood is tremendous. It's going to be interesting, again, kind of going back to Sonic Temple, when all these announcements are made, you start making those comparisons, like how will it stack up to something like Sick New World, either venue of Sick New World, as well as your other Danny Wimmer shows like Louder Than Life, also shows like Incarceration. You see the posters, you see the bands, you kind of get a feeling of who's in play, and I'm curious to see how this turns out.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we're going to know this week. Again, I think it's the 28th, which would be Tuesday, I think, is when that announcement is coming out. So we will definitely talk about it next week. We'll give you our thoughts on what we think about because again, it's another 140 bands in addition to the ones that have already been announced. And a couple of headliners that we don't yet know, but I just gave you a list of potentially good headliner possibilities. If any 2 of about 4 or 5 of those bands were a headliner, you'd feel pretty good about it.
Yeah,
So
I would agree.
We'll see how that goes. One other news story that has nothing to do with touring. I just thought this was interesting because it's something I've kind of always wondered. So I just thought it was just something worth kind of discussing. Slipknot has announced they are filing a lawsuit to assume control of Slipknot.com from an anonymous squatter. This was one of those things that was really popular in the early days of the internet. I wonder, if maybe some of our younger listeners really understand how prevalent this was early on in the internet where people would rush as soon as general people could actually get domain names. Because at first, you were at the mercy of hosting sites to create domains for you. So in most cases, your GeoCities page wasn't, mattsexton.com. It was geocities.com/whatever. So it wasn't like from the very beginning of the internet where people could actually go in and just get a name, but it was pretty early on. This was, this in the story mentions that Slipknot.com was actually registered in 2001, which would have been about the time that you started to see those independent registry possibilities come about. And, in this case, it wasn't even, and most of the times when this happened, the person who did this just sat on the name. They didn't really do anything with it. They were just looking for a paycheck. They were just like, here, I got this. Pay me a bunch of money to buy this off of me, and they go their separate ways. This guy actually took a step further and actually used the band's name to profit by providing pay-per-click ads for concert tickets, merchandise, concert VIP packages, which to me is like a totally different level of sketchiness here. This is such an interesting story to me. I think the second piece of that is probably where this guy's going to be in trouble. And again, how much trouble? Who knows? Because supposedly the domain was registered in the Cayman Islands, so it's like how much how can you really go after them? But it's like there's the one side where it's like, how do you go after somebody that just gets your name? But if they're also using it to profit off of you, that's probably when you...
Like I did that in the mid-'90s when there weren't that many websites out there. You were just wondering if a band even had a website. So this is kind of wild. I also wasn't aware that there is an anti-cyber squatting Consumer Protection Act.
Yeah, it's a really good question because in most cases, clearly a case where the band or company doesn't have the actual official website, there's no confusion about it. Everybody knows that they don't have, pretty well known. In this case, maybe new fans might not realize that registered here in the United States. I think that's where there could potentially be some sort of issue there. So
the weirdly kind of reassuring.
So we'll try to get that solved. But as we do that, good time to jump into our regular music segment. Of course, each and every week, Mike will go through and he will pull all the music, all the new albums for a given date. That given date in this case is October the 3rd. And once he does that, he will pull a song from each of the new albums and he will put it on a playlist. That playlist I will paste into the chat right now. You can go through and check out some of your favorite bands on these playlists. And of course, as we mentioned, not all the music is necessarily something we enjoy, but there's something out there for everybody. So no matter what kind of music you listen to, I think you will end up finding something you like on this playlist. So we go through, each of us will pick 2 new albums to talk about, and once we do that, we bring them here for the podcast, which appears to be rolling along now. So apologies if you had any buffering issues there, had some technical difficulties, but it seems to have smoothed out. So we're going to get to the new music now, but before we get to the stuff we picked, I know this was a pretty big week for, collections and big bands having albums. Mike, why don't you give us a rundown of kind of the best of the rest of this week's playlist?
Yeah, a lot out there as far as major titles or what I would consider to be major acts. AFI's new one came out, Silver Bleeds the Black Sun. I admire those guys for always kind of doing their own thing, but I feel like this time around they might have drifted a bit beyond where my taste in music lies. Again, that's what they do, so I'm not really upset about it, but I'm sure it's for some people, maybe not for me.
Sure.
Cathedral released Society's Pact with Satan, which was a single track. Last recording that the band ever did back in 2012, finally seeing the light of day. It's long and it's Cathedral, so if you're into that progressive stoner doom stuff that they do, then you'll probably dig it. Dirk Schneider and the Old Gang released Babylon. Obviously, Udo Dirk Schneider, legendary former frontman of Accept. This is the first full-length release from these guys that he put together back in 2020. Michael Schenker Group with a new album as well, Don't Sell Your Soul. If you're into MSG, you're going to enjoy it. Always good stuff. Let's see. Couple big releases from bands that I'm not super into, but I know they're major acts. Red Jumpsuit Apparatus released X's for Eyes, and Thrice released Horizons West. As far as re-releases and collections go, we have My Morning Jacket releasing the 20th anniversary of their Z album, and Tenacious D releasing the Complete Masterworks Volume 3 Blu-ray and DVD.
Wow, okay. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there this week, and I will say the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus track, I'm not like a huge fan of theirs. Thought it was pretty catchy. I feel like if you're a fan of what they do, I think that's a pretty good sign. That album's probably going to be pretty solid. And the MSG album, I definitely have that on the list to check out. The track on the playlist was really good. So
sounds like classic MSG. I mean, what more could you ask
that's
for?
all. That's really all you're looking for, and they seemed at least through one having delivered that. So looking forward to getting a chance to catch up with those. But we've got albums that we do have to chat about on this episode, presuming that our internet stays stable enough to do that. If not, of course, just a reminder, we do post the VODs of these on our YouTube page, youtube.com/@NerdcastEmpire. So anytime there's any technical difficulties, you can always hear the entire episode because we keep yapping, even if our internet goes out. So you'll always get the full episode up on YouTube once we are done. And let's be honest, who knows how long Twitch will be around. So we may be only on YouTube sometime in the future. But with that said, without getting any farther into that story, it's time to get to our new music. So Mike, what do you have for your first pick this week?
Yeah, note to self, find new streaming home.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, so for my first pick, we were looking at the fourth studio album from a German metal band. They are Goldsmith, and the album is Into the Wilds.
Yeah, there were a couple of, well, it ended up being your two picks that as soon as I heard them, I'm like, you know what, this really sounds like something Mike's going to, I enjoyed them too. They were really good, so I'm looking forward to getting deeper in the albums of these two, but these guys, really good stuff from them.
Yeah, absolutely. This band, they are currently a power trio with Michael Goldschmidt on vocals and guitars, Dominic Schweizer on bass, and Christoph Brandes on drums. For the playlist, I'd pulled the music video for the single We Will Burn in Hell. The song rocked, and we've talked about in the past how music videos can enhance the product, and this was basically just studio footage and some live shots of the band, but even that alone is effective. It's so much better than just random AI nonsense to your song. So, always going to be excited when bands release music videos, even if it's just that kind of live footage. Like, that's totally fine. Everything about this album feels like what you loved about traditional metal and thrash metal from like the early 80s to early 90s. There's a lot of speed at times. Then you kind of have the later, more mid-tempo stuff that you would have heard more in the 90s. Michael Goldschmidt is right up there with your favorite metal vocalists and guitarists. I would say his vocals are probably a little better than some of your favorites, though, for being totally honest. The album itself is 8 tracks and 41 minutes. Totally awesome metal, worth listening to. If I were to pick standout tracks, they would be Into the Wilds, The Nowhere Kids, Barren Blood, Slingshot Boogie, and the track that we're going to check out, We Will Burn in Hell.
Check out Goldsmith, their new album, Into the Wilds. This is the 4th track off of this album, We Will Burn in Hell. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, they have such an interesting style because, everything they do is aggressive, but not in an over-the-top way. Like, even the bass little riff there at the end before you get back into the verse is just, it's definitely up on another level, but nothing they do overpowers the mix. It's all kind of in its place, which it gives you this really high quality, but pretty easy to listen to rock and metal song. And I think that's that's generally when I'm looking for stuff on these playlists. That's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that was kind of the feeling I got from it, where there were times where it felt like kind of the early thrash stuff, like your Kill 'Em All era Metallica, but then other parts of the song felt more Black Album era, where they went a little more mid-tempo, not as ferocious as far as the speed goes, but yeah, just a quality album.
Yeah, really good stuff from them. Really enjoyed what I've heard from them so far, but definitely worth checking those guys out. The first pick, Goldsmith, Mike's first pick of this week. As always, Mike has 2 picks. What do you have for pick number 2?
Pick number 2, it's always cool to feature something from a country that maybe we don't hit as often, although it does seem like there's a fairly decent metal community here. But this is the third release from a Mumbai, India-based thrash metal crossover band. They are Carnage Inc., and this EP is self-titled, Carnage Inc.
I mean, at some point you'll probably be back in India to find out more about their metal scene, if I had to guess, on the vault. But
I'd be okay with that.
But no, I think this is a couple times that we've been to India, and if this is the kind of metal that's coming out of India, I think it's an area we need to find out more about.
Yeah, absolutely. Before this, these guys had their debut full-length album in 2019 and an EP before that back in 2016. The band themselves formed in 2011, and they are made up of Naveem Mudalayar on guitars, Varun Panchal on guitars and vocals, Nikhil Muralitis on bass, and Malhar Banashali on drums. I think their Bandcamp write-up for the EP probably explains it better than I could, and it goes as follows. Carnage Inc., as the name suggests, aims to put the whammy on much of the contemporary thrash metal. This robust, high-energy EP is firmly rooted in classic 80s thrash, yet its blazing solos and flashes of riffage also draw blood from the veins of traditional heavy metal. Adding a wicked narrative twist, the concept borrows traits from popular comic book supervillains and reimagines the band as members of the thrash villain crew Carnage Inc. The cover art kind of further drives that point home. It looks like essentially issue 3 of what would be the Carnage Inc. comic book series, so that's really cool as well. So much of the metal I like, as far as like your thrash metal, was kind of born out of the mixture of traditional metal and punk, and that's where you get that crossover, that punk hardcore with more of the traditional metal style, and these guys do that really well. The vocal style and energy screams punk, but the musicianship is definitely very metal, so the combination always going to work for me. It's a 5-track EP. It's 15 minutes long, highly concentrated crossover thrash metal. Well worth the time to check out the whole thing. The track that I picked for us to check out is the song Epic.
Check these guys out. It's Carnage Inc. with their self-titled EP. This is the second track off of this 5-track EP, Epic. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Sometimes it's hard with those type of music to find where the cutoff point is, because it's sometimes there's not a defined chorus, and sometimes the chorus is like 8 seconds long, and they immediately get back into the verse. But no, I mean, I really like the style for these guys. I love that kind of upbeat style, and kind of, it does maybe break the mold of what is kind of traditional as far as the verse chorus. It kind of runs together, which a lot of that music in that style does. But great vocals. Great music behind it. It's really, really solid.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take more of that, especially when you're talking really short, get in, get out songs. It's good stuff.
And again, it's always interesting to me to see like what types of music are popular in different countries. Like, don't know if I would have expected that maybe out of India, but maybe I should. Like, it's kind of interesting. So be interested to keep an eye on the Indian music scene. I'm sure we will revisit it at some point, but definitely check those guys out. Carnage Inc. with the second release for Mike for this week, and the EP for those guys as well. I have two albums as well to talk about. We're going to start off by going to Sweden, one of our most visited countries on this podcast, and we are going to be checking out a band that Metal Archives termed a stoner metal band from Sweden. This is Sparzanza with From Dust to Darkness. These guys were founded in 1996, so they have been around. This is their 9th full-length album. It's their first full-length album in 8 years, so great to see them back producing more music. Their band is Fredrik Willaby on vocals, Kalle Johansson on guitars, Magnus Aronen on guitar, Andres Aberg on drums, and Johan Carlson on bass. You know, we talk a lot on this podcast about bands who started maybe at the tail end of a certain era of music and they were kind of too late and they kind of disappeared. And we often wonder, like, well, what would happen if one of these bands just kept going and didn't stop? And this really describes these guys perfectly. They sound like a band that would have absolutely been popular in the late 90s or early 2000s. And they just keep putting out great music, even if maybe that wasn't as popular on the radio over here. They kept doing their thing, and they're doing it really well. Vocals are great. The music is great. It's got a great, powerful sound to it. Catchy but not cheesy, which is, you know, sometimes you get that in your stoner metal. But again, I don't know if stoner metal is necessarily the right term for it. That is, again, how Metal Archive described them. But I'm not really sure. Maybe Mike will have a better description once we talk about the track. But it's a really good album. The label called this their heaviest, darkest, and most ambitious album to date. But they're just absolutely still rocking all these years later and really cool to hear. And it was a really enjoyable listen. Standout tracks include Fear of the Night, Bloodborne, Twitch of the Death Nerve, and the song we're going to listen to on the podcast, The Blinding Absence of Light. So let's check these guys out now. This is Sparzanza with From Dust to Darkness. This is the 7th track off of this 8-track album, From Dust to Darkness. This is The Blinding Absence of Light. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
We're falling through the burning sky when silence cries into the night, like calling from the underground, the blinding absence of a
But yeah, I mean, overall, we got a really good sound. And again, it takes me back to that late 90s, early 2000s rock sounds. But these guys still doing it in 2025. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't really get stoner metal from that necessarily, but it's kind of wild looking at them on the Metal Archives. When you look at over the years, the different cover art to their albums, it kind of gives you the feeling that their style might have shifted over the years, maybe even numerous times, just because of the art that they went with. But yeah, this is really solid stuff. It's funny when you mentioned Metal Archives calling them stoner metal and then them describing the album as most ambitious. I just thought those two terms don't seem to work together very well, stoner and ambitious. So yeah, no, I think this was just quality hard rock and metal.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely interested to continue to hear these guys getting it done all these years later. So definitely check those guys out. Sparzanza with their new album out on October the 3rd. I have 2 picks as well this week. We're coming back to the United States for pick number 2. This is a heavy metal hard rock band, originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, later billed from Seattle, Washington. This is Agartha with their new EP, The Hidden. We mentioned earlier Mike had an EP and it was very tidy, 5 songs, 15 minutes. This is also 5 songs and 26 minutes, so a little bit longer from these guys. This band was founded in 2019. This is actually their debut album, following a self-titled demo in 2020. This is, according to Metal Archives, not to be confused with the black metal band Agartha from Nashville, Tennessee, which I did not see while I was in Nashville, but just in case you were wondering. The band's made up of multi-instrumentalist Jeremy Berry, who does guitars and drums, and vocalist Ryan Evans. Press release mentions this band ranges from new wave of British heavy metal to more of an underground rock sound. The song we're going to listen to on the podcast definitely has that new wave of British heavy metal vibe. They do it really well. Metal Forces magazine compared them to a band called Eternal Champion. I don't know who that is, but if you're a fan of them, I'm curious. Maybe we'll find out if this actually lines up with that. It's just straightforward rock. I'm kind of excited to see what these guys do next because I think they kind of knocked it out of the park with this first EP. So really excited to see if they can, put this together to a full-length album sometime in the near future. It is an EP, just like Mike talked about with his band, so listen to the whole thing. The song we're going to listen to for the podcast is the second track, Silver King. Check these guys out. This is Agartha with their EP, The Hidden. This is the second track off of that album, Silver King. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, I mean, I would have not pegged this band as being from the U.S. When you listen to them, they definitely sound like a band that's probably from the U.K. or something. But overall, like I said, really, really good EP. Definitely get that new wave of British heavy metal vibe from these guys, but good stuff from them. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Definitely a different feeling than the Carnage Inc. release, but still quality. Kind of surprised there aren't even more bands named Agartha. That just seems like an obvious band name, especially if you're doing any kind of like progressive or experimental music. Agartha being like the legendary kingdom that's supposed to exist inside the earth, frequently associated with Shambhala. I've seen videos about it on like the Y-Files, which is a great YouTube channel for the record. But yeah, cool concept, cool album. It rocked.
Yeah, for sure. And there were quite a few. If you if you go out there, it is definitely one of those names that shows up in a lot of different bands. So understandable that there could be some confusion and multiple bands named that. But yeah, definitely check those guys out. And I really enjoyed this, and looking forward to see where they go from here. That takes care of our new music. It is time to get into the vault, where Mike and I will each have a classic album to check out. Mike is traveling around the world, and he actually did a little better this time on his random pick. He's had some challenging ones, to say the least. He's also had some ones that I thought would be a lot less challenging and potentially could open up to some new acts that are doing good things in their country. But Mike, give us a rundown of where you are and what we've got for the vault this week.
Yeah, it's interesting because while every week is a challenge, they're different kind of challenges. It's like you get a country like Vietnam, and obviously you're not going to have a huge selection, or Turkmenistan, and that presents a challenge. But then you have a country like this week, which is Austria, where there are 641 bands on the Metal Archives from Austria. 801 of those are listed as active, so pretty wide playing field. Kind of looking into the numbers a little more, 316 of those were black metal bands or partial black metal. They could have multiple tags. 265 death metal, 22 power metal, 129 melodic metal, and 107 thrash bands.
Wow.
So I went ahead and just filtered by power metal, thinking, hey, that's kind of what I'm in the mood to listen to, so let's do that. Of the 22 bands, one jumped out at me immediately as a band that I listen to somewhat regularly, and that's the band Serenity. Great band that people should check out. I didn't pick them, obviously, but of the more obscure bands that I hadn't heard of, I did run into some kind of cool names. One band being A Ghost Named Alice, who had an EP in 2025, The World is Dying and Humanity is to Blame. The band Maniac Saint, unfortunately their last release was 12 years ago and it was just a single. The band Fallen Sanctuary, they had their last full album in 2022 and a single in 2023. And then the band that I went with, a band called Ecliptica, which is also the name of Sonata Arctica's debut album, which is a classic.
Yeah.
But my choice this week is the band Ecliptica and their most recent album, 15 in a Row.
Yeah, I'm interested. I always like to try to catch a little bit of these albums just because it's so interesting. But yeah, the fact that, you choose a name like that clearly ties you to Sonata Arctica, you're setting the bar pretty high right out of the gate.
Yeah, unless there's some other relevance to that word that I'm not aware of, because it's certainly possible.
Sure.
The title of the album, 15 in a Row, signifies the 15 years that the band had been together up to that point. They formed in 2004. They consist of Marcus Winkler, guitars and mandolin. Apparently, the band started as a solo project of his. We also have Tomas Tieber on vocals, Van Allen on guitars, Sandra Urbanek on vocals, Roman Doscher on drums and percussion, and Petra Grooves on bass. In 2007, they won the Metal Battle Austria contest, which earned them a spot at the Wacken Open Air Festival in Germany,
Nice.
which is fantastic. On the Bandcamp page for the album, it talks about their style being a blend of hard rock and heavy metal, or metal and roll, as they call it. These guys have a sound that you'd expect to see Frontiers as their label. The dual vocals between Tomas and Sandra work great on their kind of metallic rock approach. If this had been introduced into popular music in like 1990, I could see there being several hits on this album for sure. The Bandcamp also makes mention of a cover song bonus track on the physical release of this album. I couldn't find any copies of the physical release anywhere, sadly. But based on their YouTube page and then confirmed by the Stormbringer.at review, it's a cover of the Cheap Trick song Mighty Wings, which is from the Top Gun soundtrack. Good cover. I wasn't too familiar with that song, but even more surprising as I kind of dove into it farther, when I heard the song, I was like, man, this sounds like video game music. Sounds like something Capcom, like Mega Man X or something. Doing some more searching, what it turns out is the inspiration for the Street Fighter II BGM for Ken's stage in that game was heavily inspired by the Cheap Trick song. And if you listen to them next to each other, you're like, holy crap, that's genius. But anyway, this is the kind of album that undoubtedly would have been a selection of ours had we been doing the podcast back in 2020. Stormbringer.at, the Austrian heavy zine, gave the album a 5 out of 5, saying it was one of the top albums in 2020. Standout tracks on the album include the title track 15 in a Row, Masterpiece of Love, Fallen, Speed Kings, and Addict to Life.
Yeah, I'm excited to go back and check these guys out. Again, whether coincidentally or otherwise, like when you reference something that could potentially be tied to Sonata Arctica, my expectations of what you can do are a lot higher. When you say that they could be a Frontiers band, then it's pretty clear that this must be pretty high quality stuff. So
yeah, like any similarities to Sonata Arctica would start and end with the name. They feel more like heavy rock or even at times AOR in style.
Okay.
So it's not so much power metal, at least I don't think, but it's still really good.
yeah, definitely worth checking those guys out. As Mike continues around the world, he has moved on to Austria for this week. And of course, before we get to my vault pick, which is Frontiers bands, we're continuing through those. We're going to find out where Mike is headed next week. And to his benefit, he got a country in this case that he gave him a lot of options because we only had a handful of days to do this. He'll have a whole week this time, so we'll see if it will end up being easy for him or if it will be difficult for him. It is time to figure out where you are headed next week.
Sure, pick the same random country generator. I got to have some consistency here.
For sure.
And I may switch things up because I'm thinking also, on top of doing this gimmick for my vault, I may also, once we get that announcement of the full Sonic Temple lineup, I may also alternate that with checking out one of those bands each week that's going to be at Sonic Temple next year.
That would be a good idea as well.
But for now, our next country is going to be...
No way.
Wow.
There can't be that many metal bands. This is one of those ones where you may end up having to pick a backup because I'm going to be shocked if this country...
If I tell you I'm going to a landlocked Southeast Asian country, you know it's probably going to be difficult.
Yeah.
But yeah, according to this random country generator, I'm going to be checking out the metal industry in the country of Laos.
Laos. Obviously, before we move on to my vault pick, I'm curious what Metal Archive says about this, because if Metal Archive says there's no metal bands in Laos, then there's no point in not just going ahead and picking another country.
There are 9.
9. So okay, well,
the first one's great. It's I guess you'd pronounce it like it looks like bloodlust, but it's spelled like Buddha, but like Boodlust.
that might be your pick right there. You might
Yeah,
have just
they are
found gold.
Wow, you know what's amazing about this is of the 9 bands, all but 1 are listed as brutal death metal. I'm
Ooh.
sorry, besides 2. All but 2 are brutal death metal. Dictator is thrash metal, and let's see, what was the other one? Hades Ghost Spell is black/death metal. So this could be entertaining.
It could be interesting, but Laos is where Mike is headed
Yeah.
next week. So make sure you tune in, unless for some reason he can't find stuff on this, and then we'll move on to something else. But join our Discord; you'll find out if for some reason we have to pivot on Mike's trip around the world next week. But interesting stuff. I am continuing through Frontiers bands. We are up to the second week of the letter P. This was one I was kind of excited on checking out, because the guy who is behind this effort is someone we've talked about on this podcast quite a bit. This is the 12th studio album from the Danish hard rock heavy metal band Pretty Maids, and the album is Pandemonium. It was released May 14, 2010 on Frontiers Records. Ronnie Atkins, of course, the lead singer of this group, and Ronnie has been involved with a lot of Frontiers projects. He called this album the best album we've done in something like 15 or 20 years. So, and it did well in Europe. It charted number 83 on the German albums chart at debut. It was the first Pretty Maids album to chart in more than 10 years, since Anything Worth Doing is Worth Overdoing in 1999. In their native Denmark, the album debuted at number 14 and became Pretty Maids' highest charting album since Scream in 1994, was charted at number 27. It's an interesting sounding album. This is kind of different than some of the stuff that we get from Frontiers. There is the AOR type tracks that are very clean vocals, but there are songs that are definitely harder with harsher vocals on there. I was not expecting that. But they did them well, and they kind of mixed them well, which is really important for me to kind of get into it. So overall, as you expect, it's a Frontiers album. These guys have been around a long time. This was really good. Definitely worth checking out. Standout tracks include Little Drops of Heaven, One World, One Truth, Cielo Drive, and Beautiful Madness. Again, another one of those artists in Ronnie Atkins that we talk about a lot, so not a surprise that this was good, and was looking forward to kind of checking out more of their stuff, and overall was a really good release.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, I've heard a couple of their albums over the years. Undress Your Madness from 2019. I'm familiar with it. Then there was Jump the Gun back from 1990, which had a weird story because it was apparently had its name changed when it was released in the United States. It came out under the name Lethal Heroes, but it had a song like Young Blood, which is a great song. Savage Heart, Jump the Gun, just really solid band. So not surprised that this album is also good.
And I was also wondering, I can't remember, I think it was these guys. I'm not sure if we didn't talk about an album of theirs at some other point on this podcast, because I was following them on Facebook already, which is...
It's very possible they were in my vault already.
Yeah.
Let me go back and check now.
And it may have been for because I'm looking now at my Wikipedia page for ones that have been clicked. I kind of wonder if maybe their 84 album, Red Hot and Heavy, was one that you talked about potentially on one of your picks. And it would have been a while ago, because I only followed them on the Nerdcast Empire page and not the Hard Rock Empire page. So
it actually was Jump the Gun that
Okay.
I talked about back on almost a year ago now, 11 months ago.
Wow.
During my trip through the glam metal bands.
There you go. So, yeah, I kind of had a feeling that was the case. But, yeah, really, really good stuff from them. I definitely like check out more of their stuff, obviously. Really, really entertaining stuff. So next week, the problem with Frontiers is they only have one band that begins with the letter Q. So we're only going to be spending 1 week on the letter Q, and I don't know anything about this band other than that I just looked up an album of theirs that we're going to talk about. But the band is Q5. We're going to be talking about the album New World Order from Q5. They were kind of one of there's different classifications of Frontiers bands. These guys are band that had early success. They were formed in 1983. Then got back together to do a Frontiers album in the mid 2000s or 2010s. This one was released in 2016. So, looking forward to it. It's got, you read the description of it, it's got all the potential of being something that's really good. So, definitely want to know about Q5. So we're going to find out next week.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But that'll be next week on The Vault. It's time to get to the Power Trio, our hard rock hat trick. And this, fittingly, obviously, is our last program before Halloween here in the U.S. And so it is time to talk about Halloween-themed songs. We each had a chance to pick 3 songs would be fitting for Halloween. Obviously, they don't have to have Halloween in the title, or they don't have to be about Halloween.
Pretty wide.
It's a wide berth here, which is probably good, because I was having a hard time coming up with these, even though sometimes, like you said last time we did this, you struggle to get started, and then once you get started, the ideas kind of roll then. This kind of felt like one of those topics, but luckily I've got a little bit more time to come up with a third pick while you guys go over your picks. Did we get anything from Shane today?
We did not.
Okay.
Which I kind of figured this would be a good topic for him, so I'm kind of shocked I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have Chris's picks just popped into the chat. Thank you, Chris. And Mike, I'll let you run down Chris's picks.
Hey, first off, Feed My Frankenstein by Alice Cooper.
For sure.
Overall, great song. I mean, not a whole lot to say about it. Just great to see live, and so many Alice Cooper tracks would have made the cut for this topic.
Yeah.
I think. You could say the same about Rob Zombie, and he went with American Witch. Rob Zombie, most of his stuff feels like something for a horror movie he either did make or wanted to make. So, again, totally fitting. Then This Is Halloween, covered by Marilyn Manson. Manson's a guy, whether it's a cover or an original track, that I think would do well with this topic as well. So, can't go wrong there. He has his honorable mention, special shout out to Candy by Cameo.
I don't know who that is.
I've heard of Cameo, but I don't know that song.
Did Cameo do Word Up?
I think so.
Okay.
I know that I know of them for some reason.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. I'll look that up while we get into your picks. But for
Yeah.
some reason, I was thinking Cameo was Word Up.
That sounds right.
Yeah, how about
Okay.
that? That's crazy. 1986 from the album Urban Warrior, or the B-side was Urban Warrior. The album was Word Up.
Okay.
That was interesting. So,
But I think that's part of the fun of this topic is coming up with those songs that everyone else wouldn't have thought of, and I think that definitely qualifies.
yeah, like I said, I feel like I didn't really do. Mine were much more mainstream this week, but I feel like as I continue to think about the topic, I'm going to come up with some better ones. So yeah, shout out for the honorable mention. Candy was actually their next single right after Word Up.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. Very fitting. All right, Mike. I know you've got. Yeah, obviously this was a topic you had suggested, so I have a feeling that you're going to have some interesting choices that maybe aren't on the beaten path necessarily.
Kind of a mix of both, I think.
Yeah.
'Cause to me, there are some of the obvious ones, and then there are the ones that either I hadn't thought of in probably 20 years, or songs that I became familiar with because of the podcast, even.
Yeah.
So for number 1 on my picks, we are going with Typo Negative and the song Black Number 1
Okay.
from their 1993 album Bloody Kisses. You could have picked so many Typo Negative songs, but this one's a classic. It references Hallows Eve, trick-or-treating, and just, there are rumors that Typo Negative might be getting back together with some sort of tribute show for Peter Steele. People kind of have mixed emotions about that. I say go for it. The guy's no longer with us. What's the band supposed to do? And that would be a really cool act to see live. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'd definitely be down for that.
Number 2, we're going with Iced Earth and the song Wolf. That is from their 2001 album Horror Show, song inspired by the Wolfman films. The whole album has songs inspired by classic horror movie icons. Really cool album, and one of the ones that really got me into that band. But that one, Wolf, opening track of the album, so cool.
Yeah.
And finally, from our podcast a couple years ago, I talked about this band and this song. The band's from Canada. They are Blood Opera, and the song is Be My Victim.
Yeah, forgot about those guys.
The song was inspired by Candyman and even features the late Tony Todd in the song as well, who was known for his role in Candyman. So, can't go wrong with that, obviously.
No, that's a really good choice, and I didn't really think to maybe grab one from the podcast, but there could have been some options there.
I do have some honorable mentions because, you can't stop at 3.
Sure.
First honorable mention, Fastway, Trick or Treat.
Oh, okay.
The band Fastway released the album Trick or Treat back in '86. It also served as the soundtrack to the horror film Trick or Treat, which is... The soundtrack's amazing.
Sure.
The film is so bad, it's awesome. Definitely recommend it if you like really bad horror movies. Does have Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons in it, which is kind of cool as well. Second honorable mention is Wednesday 13 and his song Haddonfield. Off his 2006 album Fang Bang, inspired by the Halloween movies, and the song itself is referencing the setting of the Halloween films, Haddonfield. Really cool horror punk stuff. That whole album is a fun album, and people should check it out. And then finally, the Megas, only as the band The Belmonts under pseudonyms, doing the song Bloody Tears from their 2016 EP The Belmonts. It's their take on the song from Castlevania 2, Bloody Tears, from Kenichi Matsubara. Really cool soundtrack, cool game. That's it. What else can I say?
Yeah, all good picks for sure. And obviously, I went a little more mainstream with mine, except for the first one. I don't think is mainstream. I went with Dead Sea's Key to Gramercy Park as number one. Obviously, some dark imagery in that video. Kind of, I think, has a good horror vibe to it. If I didn't pick an Eagles song, I feel like I'm missing out. To me, Hotel California is kind of a horror song if you think about it. It's this hotel that you can never leave. It's there's a lot of like spooky ghost type vibes to that song.
Sometimes the horror is drug addiction.
Yeah, as it turns out. There are a lot of drug songs that the Eagles could potentially put up for this. And then, somebody had to mention Dawkins Dream Warriors.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the movie tied in there as well. And the video for it, if you haven't seen the video, it's just totally classic. And I figured that one you wouldn't pick because it's so obvious, but I feel like somebody needed to mention it.
Yeah, that's so great. And I'm only disappointed that, like, canonically speaking, Dawkins wasn't the one to beat Freddy Krueger.
Sure.
I feel like that's really how it all should have ended. But yeah, great video, great song, great soundtrack.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't know, all of that, if you don't know the soundtrack, if you don't know, some of the other stuff from Dawkins that maybe doesn't get the attention, like you should check. Dawkins was great.
Who would have guessed Dawkins was only a nightmare that Freddy Krueger was having?
Yes, that to me is the best the best ending of that video. That it's Freddy Krueger who wakes up from the nightmare that Dawkins provided him. So yeah, just brilliant stuff there. And like I said, it's kind of one of those things as you start thinking about them. I'm sure there are more that would pop up, but we'd love to know what your thoughts are. Join our Discord. Tell us what you think would songs that tie into Halloween. And again, like Mike said, this is probably one of the wider topics we've talked about because it could be a song that mentions Halloween. It could be a song that's just scary. It's, there's so many different options here. So definitely worth letting us know what would be your choices and what do you think of our choices for Halloween songs, because obviously next week we'll be joining you. We'll be into the month of November. And again, next week we'll be joining you after the time change. So check local listings for the time, or just join our Discord and we'll tell you when we are going to be on the air next week. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Apologies for the technical difficulties earlier if you're listening live. If you're watching on the VOD, you don't know anything about those, which is completely fine. Of course, the YouTube VOD, always a great place to catch our episodes. We upload them afterwards, so definitely worth checking that out there. Again, a reminder, back at our normal time, Sunday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. It'll be Eastern Standard Time next week. Another episode of the Hard Rock Empire, number 89. It'll be the music of October the 10th next week, so look forward to that coming up next week. Big thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat. Big thanks to Mike for all his work on this podcast. A big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. And a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you are listening. That's going to wrap things up for this week. Don't forget to join us next Sunday night for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.